Welcome to Plant Your Seed. I'm your host, Fred Ferris. On each episode, we share stories of how ordinary people have transformed their lives. Each story is compassionate, each story is authentic, and each story is a transformation. Here are the stories of the people who are changing our world by transitioning to a plant-based diet. Today on Plant Your Seed, joining us from Iowa, we have Jered Camp. Jered is the co-founder of Iowa Farm Sanctuary, Iowa's first farm animal sanctuary. He rescues and provides loving care to abused and neglected animals while advocating for animal welfare and a more compassionate world. Welcome, Jered.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here on Plant Your Seed. Now, what inspired you to start Iowa Farm Sanctuary?
My wife and I were vegan, and we'd recently converted to veganism. After a while doing that, we started looking into ways that we wanted to help animals more than just not eating them. And my wife ended up reading a book, My Gentle Barn, and she was like, "Have you ever heard of a farm sanctuary before?" And I was like, "No, I grew up on a farm, but I never heard of like a dedicated farm animal rescue." And so we were talking about it, and she was really interested in volunteering at a sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
And so we both decided, like, wow, like that'd be really cool. Like, instead of just not eating animals, like, let's go help them in other ways. So we wanted to go and volunteer at a sanctuary. So we started looking, here in Iowa, there's farms everywhere. There's farm animals all over the place. We're in the epicenter of like the agriculture industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, surely there's got to be a farm rescue here. And my wife and I started looking, and lo and behold, there were no farm animal rescues. There were no farm animal sanctuaries here in Iowa. And I was just like befuddled by it. I was like, this is so weird. Like, how is there not one? We decided to go to the closest sanctuary to us up in Madison, Wisconsin, or near Madison, Wisconsin. And when we were driving up there, we're like, man, like, how cool would that be if we started our own sanctuary, since there's none here? And it was really kind of tongue in cheek initially when we were talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
But we ended up meeting the founder of the sanctuary up there in Madison, and went to their farm and met their animals. And then we actually got invited back to meet a couple of their board members. And for a few hours, we talked to them kind of the backside of what what it takes to start a nonprofit and what it takes to start a sanctuary. And the 4 hours back from Madison to or 3 hours from Madison to Iowa, my wife and I decided, like, you know what, like, this is something that we want to do. I grew up on a farm in Utah, and so I've got some background in raising animals. It was a long time ago, but I did do it, and my wife's got a huge heart, so we decided after we got back, we're like, man, this is something that we want to look into and possibly do. And yeah, so it was really just kind of ignorance and excitement and kind of wanting to do something for the animals that nobody has done here in Iowa yet. And that was our biggest motivation.
What are some of the specific challenges that you face with your sanctuary being in Iowa?
Well, one of our biggest challenges is space. Everybody, when we went into this, I was always wondering, well, how are we going to get these animals when, this is like farmers' money. This is what they raise for money. And the thought of them just giving away animals, really I didn't understand how that would happen.
Right.
Well, it's quite the opposite. And, after talking with other sanctuary founders, they say that, animals are not going to be the problem. You're going to get as many animals as you could possibly get. And it was wild. It was just like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they'll come. Once we started, I mean, we were just inundated with phone calls of hobby farmers, and other farmers that had animals with special needs, or they befriended these animals and they didn't want to take them to slaughter. And so it was really just wild. There were so many, like, right away. So our biggest struggle right now is actually having enough space and making sure that we have enough space to provide homes for all the animals. I mean, we could have another 200 acres and fill it up within a year based off the number of emails and phone calls we get for farm animals.
Iowa Farm Sanctuary works with Iowa DOT and EMA to be the first call when the disaster strikes involving farm animals. How is this partnership working out?
So it was working out pretty well up until last year. And it all stemmed from our partnership with them stemmed a few years back when there was a semi accident involving cattle
Mm-hmm.
that we went to help out with. And we got on scene. We were doing what we can to help get secure the animals. And after the fact, with me working as a paramedic, I've got my TIMS certification where we work with the DOT and it's about going out and safety on accident sites.
Mm-hmm.
And the DOT was looking at the notes of like the sheriffs and the dispatchers and saw that we were out there helping. So they invited us to come to a after incident brief where all the parties involved, the police, the fire department, all the emergency responders, they just kind of talked about the incident, what went well, what could have gone better. And from there, they didn't know we existed, but they knew that we had some resources that could help out with stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so they got our contact information, and they would contact us if there was an accident in the area, and if we could come and help out, we would. However, last year, the state, forget the name of the law, but there's a new law here in Iowa that if specifically pigs, if there's a pig act or a truck that's carrying pigs, if that's in an accident and any of the pigs get out, no rescue can come out there and rescue the animals,
Really?
regardless if it's us or these the companion animal rescues, the Humane Society. Nobody can come out and rescue those animals off the side of the interstate. The police department has to call the state vet, and the state vet will come out and euthanize the animals, even if they're uninjured.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. It's insane how many piglets fall off the semis here in Iowa. It's
Really?
we know when they're transporting piglets because we'll start getting phone calls all the time about, hey, we just saw 3 pigs on the side of the road.
Hmm.
But what they'll do is these farmers will put up to 2,500 piglets in one semi when they move them from the breeding facility to the fattening facilities. And the little piglets, they're in these trailers that are, they're just livestock trailers that they are used for cows, pigs, all, different livestock. And so there's the ventilation holes in the sides. Well, the little piglets can clump up to where the bigger holes are halfway up, and then they'll just start falling out. Or the back doors may not close all the way and they have a malfunction and they just fall out on the interstate. It's pretty tragic. It happens every year.
Hmm.
But we would go out and rescue those pigs. We've rescued a lot of pigs that way. However, now we just can't do that. One of the first incidences that we got caught up in with that was an Iowa City police officer actually rescued a little piglet on the side of the road and drove him over to the local Iowa City animal shelter. And they contacted us, and we came over and we're like, yeah, we can help. We went and got the piglet to bring her back to our farm, and the police department had posted on their social media a little picture of the little pig in the cop car,
Mm-hmm.
and just it was a really cute photo. It was a really good post,
Yeah.
and somehow the state vet or the IDALS is the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land.
Mm-hmm.
IDAL saw that, contacted Iowa City Police Department, and said they need that piglet right away. Well, they told the IDALS that they were at the Iowa City Animal Shelter. They called the director at the animal shelter and said, we need that piglet. And what we ended up having to do is take the piglet back to the shelter. They came out and they were going to euthanize this piglet, but the director of the Iowa City Animal Shelter and us were basically like pleading with them, like,
Right.
we don't want this to happen. And so now what we have to do is you have to be a licensed pig dealer to rescue these pigs, but you have to quarantine them for 30 days and do all kinds of testing on these pigs. And it's all part of that law. So it's just a bunch of hoops to like jump through. But we're not a licensed pig dealer, so we can't do that. So
Oh.
anytime there's a piglet that's found on the side of the road, legally we can't go out and help them out. which is just, it's devastating.
Yeah. What happened with that pig?
They quarantined the pig there at the shelter, and she ended up not getting euthanized, and we ended up finding her a home at another sanctuary. So she's safe. She's good.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, yeah, and it worked out really well.
Could you become a quote pig dealer in order
Um,
to do that?
yes, we can. I'm not sure if we're gonna do that yet or not, though.
Right.
Only we just need to look into it a little bit more. Because then we may jeopardize some of our animals here with chronic illnesses and things like that the state deems euthanize like immediately. So we don't have any sick animals here now that are like that. We just had a sheep that passed with a disease called Yonis.
Hmm.
But there's certain diseases that the state deems necessary to euthanize immediately. And if we're a dealer, we may have to abide by all their rules and regulations when it comes to those types of things. So it's something that we want to do so that we can help rescue as many animals as we can. But it's a fine line we have to walk with making sure that we're not jeopardizing some of the animals that we already have or that we could help in the future.
Seems like it would be a great space for someone to become a quote pig dealer and then quarantine them for 30 days and then just hand them over to you. If you
Yeah.
find those on the side of the road, right? Isn't that what you said? If you find
Yeah.
them on the side of the road, they got to go to a pig dealer.
Yeah, most of the time the state will just euthanize them though because it's so much they'll make it more of a hassle. But yeah, I mean it's when we started the sanctuary after the first few months and even after the first year, I tell everybody we could solely be just a pig sanctuary.
Wow.
We could fill hundreds of acres of just of piglets and pigs that need homes. That's by far the number one animal that we get contacted about. Which makes sense because in Iowa there's 7 pigs to every human.
Really?
So yeah, it's 7 to 1 is the ratio. But it's wild because when you drive through Iowa, you very rarely ever see any pigs. They're just
Yeah.
all in those massive confinements. So you just never see them. But yeah, the pig population is just it's pretty wild. There's one of the largest confinements up in northwestern Iowa. We were able to rescue a few of the pigs. Actually, our first 2 pigs, Monkey and Marley, came from there after one of the workers just walked out with them because they were runts.
Hmm.
But she was responsible for culling the runts. And she said that this facility, just this one facility alone, would cull 2,000 piglets a week just
A
because they were
week.
runts and they were small. And that's just in a week. I mean, it's insane. It's pretty wild, like the numbers, but that's their industry.
That is pretty strange, pretty amazing.
Yeah.
2000 a week?
Yep. So that, and the pigs can have up to like 20 babies, and they're breeding them to have more and more babies. It's just staggering to even think of the amount of space you would need to have that many, and then to think of that many that would die.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
So on the transport trucks, they climb up or they get boosted up and they escape out of the bigger holes.
Yep.
And that's
Yep.
how they end up on the side of the road.
Yes. Yep. That happens. And then also like their back doors are roller doors, and sometimes those they don't lock them all the way. And the
Hmm.
roller door will just kind of pop up to where there's a space at the bottom that they can come out.
What has been your biggest challenge at the sanctuary?
Um, well, personally, compassion fatigue
Mm.
is a big challenge. Because we take in so many like special needs animals, and there's animals that we try really hard and we dedicate so much time to help out, and they're just born with genetic problems, and there's just not much that we can do.
Hmm.
The animals that we've had to euthanize just due to illnesses or injury, or not injuries, but like previous injuries that they just weren't able to survive from. There's a lot of love with farm sanctuaries and watching animals grow and watching them, run free in the pastures. But there's, the ones that like you dedicate so much time to that just don't make it. The constant battle of talking with people, are like, why are you doing that? And
Hmm.
just the the speciesism that is just runs rampant here in Iowa of they don't,
Mm.
people just don't understand why we dedicate so much time and money towards what people think of as food animals. And so
Right.
it's kind of like it just compiles a lot, but that's probably one of my biggest personal like struggles.
Right.
The sanctuary, the biggest, the biggest struggle or one of the bigger struggles we have is just having enough volunteers to help out with 130 plus animals. Because there's varying species of animals we have, and there's varying animals with different needs. We've got our little calf Angel, or she's not a calf anymore. She's a little cow.
Mm.
She's 4 years old, but she's got her wheelchair that she goes into every day. Um, we've got another cow, JJ. He's got some mobility issues. He was born with some genetic problems with his back and his legs. So having enough, and then we need to clean their stalls pretty much every day. So getting enough volunteers out here. Summertime it's not too bad, but the wintertime, like right now, it's 22 degrees outside and it was
Mm.
snowing earlier. So getting volunteers to come out and do manual labor for free is something that we're always like trying to figure out like the best way to entice more people to come out and do that.
How do you deal with that as far as the shortages of volunteers?
Well, one of the things that my wife and I decided when we started this, and based off of what a lot of other sanctuary founders gave us advice in doing, was grow to what you can handle, and just slow grow. And when you have like established help, then you can kind of like grow more. When you have the financial resources, you can kind of grow more that way. And so that's kind of the approach that my wife and I have done from the very beginning. So now we do have a core set of volunteers that we have come out religiously. They're really excellent.
Hmm.
We do have one person on staff now. And so it was a long process of just making sure we can grow with what we could handle. And
Right.
so, excuse me, I still go out and do like a lot of the labor. My wife, she does a lot of the labor as well with like with the animals and things like that. So I work full time still, but this is like I always joke with people like this is my real job. This is like this is what I like have more struggles with. Like I can do CPR on people all day long and give meds all day long. Sorry, IVs like that's easy stuff now. But being here on the farm and doing the farm work and helping with the animals, like that's the really hard work.
How do you continue on after a death of one of your residents?
Well, personally, I when we do have an animal or one of our residents die, I like to go out with the herd, and go out with all the other animals and just kind of remind myself of why we're doing this.
Hmm.
I respect the life of these animals that we lost, and they're because I mean they're really our friends.
Right.
We take them out of these bad situations and we try to give them the best home possible, and we put a lot of care into them. And so we respect their life by taking care of the rest of the animals. And it's usually when we have one die, they have friends here as well.
Hmm.
They've got their little herds and their little sub herds, and they're friends within that. And we've seen like the sadness in the other animals after one of them have died. So we'll go out there and just kind of hang out with them and just kind of mourn together. But at the end of the day, like our goal is to really help as many animals as we can, whether that's rescuing them here or through advocacy. And so just focusing on that goal and focusing on those things, that's what really kind of gets us through all of that.
Now, Iowa is the first state to pass the ag gag law,
Mhm.
and it also has that pig law that I was unaware of. What is the reaction that you get from native Iowans?
Well, most farmers around here, they don't like that. They think that, well, they're either unaware of that law, but when we talk about cruelty to animals,
Mm-hmm.
every farmer that we know, they're like, well, one of the first things they always say is like, well, I don't do that. I
Mm.
don't treat my animals that way. And then they look on those types of things like, yes, anybody that does that, that's wrong. Like nobody should treat their animals that way. And so that's one of the, it's always from their perspective is they don't do anything wrong. It's
Right.
always it's the other guy. And most of the farmers, like I don't think farmers are bad people. They just do bad things to animals.
Right.
And I try to, it's hard to say that to them because they get so defensive, like, no, I don't. But in the end of the day, I mean, they are taking these animals that they care for in a strange way, but they do take them to slaughter and they're raising them, for their babies, for their milk, and for food. And so it's just hard to circle that square. So, but yeah, most of them, as far as like the ag gag, a lot of them, I don't talk a lot with the farmers about that, and the ones that I have said things to, they either don't understand it or they actually look down on it. I've never met anybody that's been supportive of it. Like, yeah, like they should be able to do what they want and treat those animals as poorly as they want without anybody knowing. Nobody's ever said that at all. So,
What is it about the farmers that you talk to that causes this cognitive dissonance with it's the other guy, it's not me?
and I think it's hard for people to kind of look at what they're doing as being bad. And
Right.
and I think it's because they were raised that way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that because I used to think the same way. I grew up in Utah with a family that we would buy animals at a young age and we'd raise them for food. So my chores were, feeding the cows and the goats and everything before I went to high school. And I look back on it, I was like, I wasn't bad to those animals. Like what I was doing wasn't mean,
Mm-hmm.
but ultimately, like we were raising them for food. And so I think that it's just them growing up in that way without challenging their perspective and challenging like what they're actually doing as being harmful,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that they'll care for those animals and they treat them well up until they don't on the day that they take their life. And they just kind of block that one final moment out of what they're doing to these animals. And they just look back on, the 3 months like, oh, I went out there, I pet them, I fed them, I watered them, I
Right.
ran with them. But they just completely block out the finality of them taking the life of that animal. And they just chalk that up as, oh, well, that's what we do. And it's just, it's simple to them, but it's not so simple to that animal. And I don't think that they really look at it from the perspective of that animal.
How did you overcome that dissonance that you used to feed the animals and then your family would then ship them off, or what would happen?
Well, we would slaughter like some of the animals at the farm, or we would take the bigger animals over to just like a local meat packer.
Mm.
Um, what really changed my perspective was when I moved to Atlanta, Georgia. I moved to Atlanta to go to paramedic school. And so it was just a removal of that lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't around the hunting, I wasn't around, the farm. I moved into the city with some friends and I started, I read a book, it's a Fast Food Nation by Eric Schlosser.
Mm-hmm.
And what it was everybody knows that factory farming is really bad. But that book really opened my eyes not only to actually how bad it is, but kind of the corporate control of what those fast food companies have, and then also how bad it is for humans and the migrant workers that work there. And so when I saw just this industry in a different light, it really piqued my interest, and it was just weird because I'd never thought about it that way before. I never really, thought about killing animals as being bad.
Right.
But once I started peeling back that onion and realizing how bad that industry is, and not just for the animals. I mean, it's terrible for them, but there's so many other factors that are involved. And I mean, it piqued my curiosity, and I just couldn't support that industry anymore. And then that's when I started looking into more like advocacy for the animals and what compassion really is.
Mm-hmm.
And I look back on what I did to animals, and it just, I mean, it's terrible. And I feel like this like big regret and just like disgust. But I can't go back and change the past, but what I try to do is, try to communicate with people that were maybe in my position back then, and just talk to them and be like, there's a way out of it, and there's reasons you don't need to do that. So I just try to use my past experience to help others kind of see a different light.
Let's change over to your vegan journey. You said that it's kind of started when you moved to Atlanta. Can you take us through how and when you transitioned to a plant-based diet?
Yeah, so I like I say, I moved to Atlanta in 2000 to go to paramedic school, and in 2002, 2003 is when I read that book, and like I say, it just really it blew my mind, and that book and then a call that I went on would really just like it was just both of those things that really led me onto the journey. But I went into a Taco Bell for a medical call. And as I walked in, the patient was in the cooler where they had like all the boxes of meat.
Mm-hmm.
And when I walked through, I looked at one of the boxes of meat, and on the side of it, it just said grade C for human consumption. And that's that part where it said for human consumption really took me back. I was like, why do they have to put that on there? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is there a grade C that's not for human consumption? Like, it was just like it was really weird to me. And so when I looked into it, there is a grade back then, there was a grade C for dog food. And I'm like, oh my God, Taco Bell is basically dog food. And it was so gross. And then when I started reading this book, I'm like, oh my God, like this is terrible. Like, what is going on with this industry? And I'm like, Taco Bell's feeding dog food basically to people. And I'm like, oh, that's it. I swore off Taco Bell. I swore off like all fast food.
Mm-hmm.
And but like I say, after that, I started looking into more of like advocacy. And I was like, well, like they treat these animals so badly. And I knew of PETA back then, and it was just kind of like what was on the news. And
Right.
I started looking more into like what they do, and we started watching Whale Wars. Whale Wars was another really big push for us with like really advocating for animals.
Mm-hmm.
And both my wife and I are like, man, we need to go on, like we need to like do Whale Wars. Like that would be so cool to go out on the Steve Irwin in the middle of the Antarctic and like fight all these Japanese like ships with like that are whaling. It was, we couldn't do that obviously, but it was, it was something that we really wanted to go and do. Man, it's really like peeling back an onion. Once I started learning more about what the animal agriculture industry does, then there's the health benefits and of going vegan, and how many like health problems come from this like American diet of just meat on meat on meat.
Right.
And then there's environmental, and there's an environmental side of this whole thing. So once I realized like this veganism is this core center
Mm-hmm.
with all these different like reasons of why, of supporting it, I just, that it was just finally that was what I had to do. And it's now there's just no turning back. Like I could never go
Yeah.
back.
No.
And there's so many different arguments, like of why you should be doing it, whether it's the health, whether it's the animal advocacy, whether it's the environmental side. I'm just overwhelmed with evidence of this is the best thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, once you get started, right, you start going down that rabbit hole. You start, as you said, peeling back that onion. You just see more and more and more, and then there's no way that you can possibly go back.
Yeah,
It just doesn't make sense.
yeah.
Now, when you went into that Taco Bell and you're in that freezer, and meanwhile you're reading this book, and it all kind of clicks. Take us back to that.
I think it was, I started looking at what I did when I watched animals die my hand,
Mm-hmm.
whether I was hunting or whether, I was helping my, when we would like kill rabbits. We would, we do that at the farm. And I started looking back on kind of what I did and started thinking about like, well, I was around these animals and, I knew that these animals had like sentience, like I would watch them out the window and watch them play with each other. Like they had friends,
Hmm.
but I never assigned that to them being a being or them being an individual.
Hmm.
It was just, oh, there they are. Or, I would call them an it and, it's sick or it needs to go. So I never really just assigned them as an individual. And I think that when I was reading that stuff, it made me want to challenge. And then I started thinking back on my past and this guilt of what I did, like got so overwhelming. I felt compelled to do something to not feel that way anymore.
Mm.
And it started off with, well, one, just stop eating the animals.
Right.
That's the first like big impact that I can do. And it kind of grew from there. But I think like the biggest change for me was really just that retrospective look on what I've done and what I experienced and recognizing that that was something that needed to change and that I wasn't happy with, and then just kind of forming a plan of how I can change and do better.
I think that's a great point. You can't change the past. You can only affect the future. So, like you said, you realized what had happened. I'm sure we all have things in the past that we aren't proud of. And you made a change that's affected so many more animals by doing what you're doing. So, it's fantastic. It took a lot of courage to take that step and then to start a whole sanctuary in a way, I guess, in a way to make amends. Is that the way you feel?
I think that I do. I want to help as many as I can,
Mm.
as many of these animals as I can, and I think that the best way that I can do that is by using this platform and by doing that. But yeah, I think that, starting it all, it was definitely motivated by like wanting to do things better, and not, I use the motivation of what I did in the past to make sure that I'm doing the best and being the best person that I can now.
Right.
Um, yeah, I think that was probably one of my biggest motivations.
What is it about animals that makes you so passionate?
Being around them, again, seeing their sentience, seeing their personalities, and watching them grow and watching them form friendships. And there's a lot. Everybody's been around. Like, a lot of people have been around um, like dogs and cats, these companion animals, and
Hmm.
most people will assign them with being an individual. They know when their dog's happy, they know when their dog's sad, or if they're scared. Cats may be a little bit different because they're weirdos, but I'm not a cat person. But they're no, in all honesty, like even the cats, like we have cats here, and like they'll run and play and things like that. But not a lot of people have been around farm animals to see that. And after being around, and I've never been around as many as I am now,
Hmm.
but the more and more I'm around them, the more and more I see the exact same things that I've seen with companion animals, where they bond with, other animals. And it's not even the same species. We have, you know, cows and pigs that are friends. There
Mm.
are cows and goats that are friends. They're, they're always with each other. Like lay down with each other. They snuggle each other. You know, they they're complete individuals. And after being around them and seeing that, it's fascinating. And I want to make sure that people can come out here and see that and kind of experience that for themselves. So maybe they'll be able to change their perspective of when, how they see these animals.
What is it about the different species that they become friends? Like, is it something that you see all the time with specific animals? You were saying pigs and cows, but is it like goats aren't friends with pigs or anything like that?
I think we see it because we with some of our animals they are intermixed. Our one of our little pigs right now, Theo,
Hmm.
she had a back injury, and so she doesn't walk very well. She can walk on her own and she gets around. But she can't go in with the larger pigs just because they're pretty territorial and they can pick on her and injure her.
Mm-hmm.
So we let her just kind of go in with the what we call our misfit pasture, and our misfit barn, and that's where we have most of our animals with special needs.
Mm.
But she'll go in and she loves hanging out with JJ. And JJ's that cow. He's the cow with the mobility issues as well.
Mm-hmm.
So he lays down a lot. And Theo lays down a lot. So she'll always just go and find him, and she'll just kind of like nuzzle up like right into like his stomach and into his side, and he'll put his chin like right on top of her. And so I think they just find, this friendship in being around each other. But then, there's some we have some rescue goats that they don't want to be around anybody but their family
Mm.
unit, and they'll just stay, kind of isolated from them. They'll just run around their own little herd through the pastures. Then we have a goat, Benny. He's the first goat we rescued. He's, the ambassador of the misfit like barn. He'll walk around and like hang out with anybody. He'll hang out with the other goats. He'll hang out with the turkeys. He'll hang out, with the pig. Like it's, I mean, I can't really answer why they do it aside from that's what they want to do and that's
Mm.
what they like doing, and they choose to do that, and that's just how they want to live. So I think it's their choice, and they obviously enjoy it, and I'm just glad that they have that place to do that.
So is Benny running for mayor? The
Yeah, he should.
sanctuary.
He should. He'd win.
Now, getting back to your vegan journey, did you struggle with anything when you first became vegan?
Yeah, it was hard to find a lot of vegan options in the early 2000s in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And even being in such a large city, there there weren't many options. There was one like dedicated vegan restaurant, but it was very like up like high end restaurant. That, I mean, it was great food, but
Mm-hmm.
as a paramedic, I wasn't able to afford going there all the time.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of like there weren't as many vegan options in the grocery stores as there are now.
Right.
I remember when soy milk like back then was first like going out, and you could get it at Starbucks, and I was like, oh, cool, I can get like a soy latte. But like the soy milk back then, they had to shake it up like a lot because it would get chunky. And I
Yeah.
remember like getting like the chunks. And I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna close my eyes and drink it because it tasted good. Just the thought of like having this chunky milk was really gross. Yeah. It was so like those were struggles back then. But it made me start cooking on my own more and
Mm.
trying new things that way. And so that's how I was able to kind of overcome a lot of that, was by going to the grocery store and buying some, there were no, there's no Gardein, there were no Impossible back then. So, we had Morningstar Farms, I think they had some vegan stuff back then. There was a little shop. I was really fortunate. There was a vegan shop right around the corner of my house. It was Cosmos Vegan Shop,
Mm.
and they sold like online back then, and 90% of their business was online. But
Wow.
they lived like walking distance from my house, so it was really cool. I'd go in there, and they had a lot of vegan meats and vegan cheeses that they got from like I think it was Korea and Thailand.
Really?
And because they've had plant-based, products for a really, really long time over there.
Hmm.
And so they would get a lot of those products here. And it didn't have like any English like writing on it for like so you could like look at the ingredients. So but the shop owner's like, I promise you this is vegan. And I'm like, all right, cool. And I remember the first like vegan cheese I had from there. I was like, "What the hell is this? Like, this is so strange," because it didn't melt. It just looked like shredded carrots, like when I'd like put it on pizza. But it had a decent like flavor. But I imagine if I had that same cheese now, I'd be like, "Oh my God, this is disgusting." But back then, that's all we had. So
What did you learn from those struggles? Do you appreciate it more now that you had the struggles back then?
well, the way I look at it is, with growth, you're not very comfortable,
Mm.
and so out of growth, you have struggles always, and that's how we grow, and that's how we grow in good ways and bad ways. But there's always that uncomfortableness that you experience with it. And so I look back at it and like one of the big benefits is I learned to cook, and like I learned that there's so much more out there that I can do with little, with very little. But a lot of that actually helps me with these arguments I have with people about like plant-based like agriculture.
Mm.
So we look at, like the farms here. If when you drive through Iowa, all you see is crops after crops after crops. It's just cornfields and soybean, cornfields
Hmm.
and soybean. And none of that, like 90% of it is not for human like consumption. It's
Right.
it's for animal agriculture. So we're growing food for food. And so when I talk to people, it's like how much 1 acre, like how many people can you feed with human food versus with like soybeans or corn? And I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head right now. I should have wrote them down, but like it's massive. It's completely different.
Hmm.
And so I think that those struggles back then of learning to cook and not having things, it definitely helped me like form better arguments and better opinions of like why I should be doing what I'm doing and why veganism is such a great thing.
Is most of that corn and soybeans, is that GMO?
A lot of it is, yeah. Yeah. Every once in a while you'll see farmers that have like the signs that say do not spray here organic, but very, very few. So then you'll
Right.
see like their food plots where they have the different signs. I mean, it's roadside advertising. There'll be just rows of corn, and then you'll see Cargill and all these different signs in front of these rows of just the different seeds. At an original farm that we bought when we first started, right down the road, there was a test field for crops, and they would grow crops, and they were only doing it to test how well they grow here in Iowa.
Hmm.
And so they were just sectioned off areas of different corn species and different soybeans. And there were workers out there all the time, like marking them with flags. And I mean, it was pretty wild, like to see it happening. But yeah, and those were definitely all GMO, 100%.
What is one thing that is exciting for you, either personally or with Iowa Farm Sanctuary right now?
I think just the constant growth of our sanctuary here in Iowa. I just feel like we're getting to the point now where we're viewed as like this legitimate organization that's doing the best, that we can here in Iowa.
Hmm.
And like hearing people, talk about knowing that there's this advocacy group fighting for these farm animals right here in the center of Iowa. I think, seeing people being excited about that outside of our state is pretty awesome because everybody here knows how important it is. Like
Hmm.
everybody here is like sees their families in this business, or I think it's like 1 in 3 Iowans are employed by the agriculture industry, and there's just not a lot of advocacy for the animals here, and so being able to get recognized elsewhere for what we're doing here, I think brings a lot of pride to what we're doing. And I know that my wife and I are really excited about that and being able to grow in ways that are helping more animals and grow in ways that are reaching more and more people that we possibly can.
Now, I noticed that you guys are part of the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries and also a top rated nonprofit. So that must give you some pride.
It is. Yep. Yeah. It's the GFAS accreditation was tedious and it was a lot of work and it took over a year to do to get everything done. But once we were done, it was great. It was absolutely like it felt so good to be able to be, this accredited sanctuary when there's so few accredited sanctuaries here in the United States or even worldwide. There's not that many.
Right.
So for us to be able to do that is was pretty awesome. We actually just recently did a rescue in the county just south of us where they had a lot of really sick animals that we had to quarantine. And we still have a handful of the animals in quarantine right now. It's gonna be like a 6 month quarantine, but the IDOLs as well as the USDA had to come to our farm to do an inspection to make sure our quarantine procedures were up to par,
Mm-hmm.
or if we would have to basically quarantine all of our animals. But once they came in, the USDA and IDOLS both were just impressed. They were like, wow, you guys have like such an incredible quarantine procedure. And, they were very excited about it. And, we didn't have any problems with it, and it all stems from that accreditation. So, it's something, like I say, it took a lot of work, but we're really proud of what it took to get that. And ultimately, it's doing better for the animals. It's kind of shining lights on areas that maybe we weren't paying attention to, that we would just need to improve our sanctuary on. And we're always, we're very humble, and we want to make sure that we're doing what we can. And if there's a better way to do something, or if we're doing something wrong, we're open to changing all that. And the GFAST accreditation definitely helped us out with that.
Now, you mentioned that you learned how to cook. Now, is there a cookbook or a book or documentary that you would recommend to someone transitioning to a plant-based diet?
My Bible for veganism, for cooking, was Isa Chandra's Veganomicon. That book was just, I tore so many pages, and like I bought two books because like the first one, like it was used so much that I couldn't open it anymore. Like that was hands down like the best book back then. Or Vegan with a Vengeance is another one of her books. Like both of those books were just, I mean, they're easy. They were they're like ingredients you could just get at your local like Hy-Vee or Kroger or whatever grocery store you have.
Mm-hmm.
And they were really, really good. So, but that's the one I always like tell, like the Veganomicon and Vegan with a Vengeance. Like, and Issa's super cool. So she makes it a lot of fun to cook with her books too.
Now, finally, can you give me one word to describe how you felt before you became vegan, and one word to describe how you feel now that you are vegan?
Knowing what I know now, I think that before I became vegan, I would definitely call myself ignorant. Ignorant and not understanding, the complexity of animals the way that I thought that I did.
Mm-hmm.
In one word now, I think compassionate. I think compassionate because I see these animals as individuals now, and they're my friends, they're my family, and knowing how they experience these complex emotions, I just want to, I want to tell the world about it, and everybody feels that they love animals. Everybody has a sense of like being compassionate towards animals. Nobody's going around being like, yeah, animals suck. Like I don't want anything to do with them. Everybody, even non-vegans,
Mm-hmm.
I'm always hearing people say, I love animals. I love animals. I think animals are great, but they're missing that compassion. And I think that the compassion is of being around these animals is fuel for that right now.
Such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Now, what is the best way for people to follow you guys, support you guys, either on Instagram, the web, Patreon, whatever it is?
So yeah, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. It's just Iowa Farm Sanctuary. We're posting every day up there. We do, like, anytime we have fundraisers, we'll post about them on there. But we do have a Patreon. If you want to support us through Patreon, we have a bunch of different programs through Patreon. We've got Venmo, PayPal, all those different sites that we use to raise money. We're going to be having our spring opening fundraisers. We call it our picnic. It's going to be in May, and we're going to have an online silent auction. It's going to be pretty cool. I'm going to tell, nobody knows about it yet, but one of our volunteers have made these quilts with some of our animals on them, and they're one of the most fascinating quilts I've ever seen. So I'm really stoked. Nice. I know they're going to sell really fast, or they're going to sell they're going to be like hotcakes on the silent auction, but people need to check that out because they're pretty cool.
All right. Thanks again, Jered, for being on Plant Your Seed.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hope you are inspired by this story, and remember, it's never too late to plant your seed. Links to everything we talked about on the podcast can be found on Instagram at plant.yourseed in the show notes tab in the bio. If you enjoyed the show, remember to leave us a review, and until next time, Thank you for listening.